The enemy ship descended like a chrome-plated viper, its menacing shadow blotting out the distant stars. Captain Elena Veras gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles whitening as she watched the alien vessel drift ever closer. "All batteries, stand by," she ordered, her voice level despite the pounding of her heart. "Helm, evasive maneuvers. We need to buy time until a fleet arrives." The Athena's engines roared to life, its sleek hull darting and weaving as the enemy ship unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. Alarms blared, console lights flickering as the ship's shields strained to hold. Shields down to 60% and falling. Her first officer, Commander Neela Adar, reported. "We can't take much more of this." Elena's jaw tightened. "All right then. Helm, take us in close. Load the payload." The Athena surged forward, closing the distance to the alien ship. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she watched the targeting reticle converge on her enemy. "Firing solution acquired," the weapons officer announced. "Ready to launch on your command." Elena's finger hovered over the firing control. This was it, the moment of truth. Fire. A brilliant bolt of energy lanced out, striking the enemy vessel amidships. The alien ship rocked under the impact, its shields flaring brightly before collapsing. For a heartbeat, Elena dared to hope that their gambit had worked. Then the enemy ship's engines flared to life, and it began to turn, its weapons powering up for another salvo. "Shields down to 40%. Neela cried. "We won't survive another hit like that." Elena's mind raced, searching for some way to turn the tide. They were outmatched, outgunned, and running out of time. The fleet was still minutes away, and the Athena couldn't hold out much longer. "Helm, get us out of here," she said, resignation creeping into her voice. "We need to buy the fleet some time." The Athena lurched into a tight turn, its engines straining as it fled the pursuing alien ship. Elena watched helplessly as the enemy vessel closed the distance, its weapons charging for the killing blow. "Brace for impact," Nyla shouted. Elena closed her eyes, bracing herself for the end. But the expected blast never came. Instead, a blinding flash of light filled the bridge, accompanied by a deafening roar. When Elena opened her eyes, the enemy ship had vanished, leaving only a swirling cloud of debris in its wake. The Athena shuddered, its systems flickering as the crew stared in stunned silence. What happened?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Nyla's face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and terror. I don't know. It's as if the enemy ship just disappeared." Elena turned her gaze to the viewscreen, where the debris field swirled and danced in the void of space. Something had happened, something beyond their understanding, and as she watched, a new sensation began to stir within her. A strange, unnerving awareness that the universe had just shifted in ways they could scarcely comprehend. In the aftermath of the Athena's harrowing encounter, the crew worked tirelessly to assess the damage and restore their systems. Elena paced the bridge, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of what had happened. "Report," she said, addressing Nyla and the rest of her senior staff. Nyla cleared her throat, her expression grave. "The good news is that the Athena is still operational, though our shields and weapon systems are severely compromised. The bad news is that we've lost all contact with the rest of the fleet. It's as if they simply vanished." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Vanished? What do you mean?" "We've scanned the area thoroughly, but there's no trace of the other ships," Nyla explained. "It's as if they were simply erased from existence." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the implications of Nyla's words hanging heavily in the air. "So we're alone out here?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nyla nodded. "It would appear so, Captain. Whatever happened to that enemy ship, it seems to have had some kind of catastrophic effect on the surrounding space. We're cut off from the rest of the fleet, and we have no way of knowing what's happened to them." Elena's mind raced, weighing their options. They were stranded, wounded, and outgunned, a sitting target for any remaining enemy forces. And with the fleet gone, there was no one left to come to their aid. "Suggestions?" she asked, her eyes scanning the faces of her crew. The bridge fell silent, save for the hum of the Athena's engines and the occasional beep of a console. Elena could see the fear and uncertainty in her crew's eyes, and she knew that they were all grappling with the same unsettling questions. "We can't stay here," Ensign Tara Karan, the ship's navigator, finally spoke up. "If there are any other enemy ships out there, we'll be easy pickings. We need to get moving, find some place to hide, and regroup." Elena nodded, considering the young woman's words. "Agreed. Helm, set a course for the nearest inhabitable system. We'll need to find a safe haven to make repairs and try to re-establish contact with the fleet." Captain," the helmsman replied, his fingers dancing across the console. As the Athena powered up its engines and began to move, Elena couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something had fundamentally changed, that the universe they knew had been irrevocably altered by the events of this day. Whatever awaited them, she knew that their lives would never be the same. The Athena's journey to the nearest inhabitable system was a tense and harrowing affair. With their shields and weapon systems severely compromised, the crew remained on high alert, scanning the void for any sign of hostile activity. As they approached their destination, a small, unassuming planet, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps here they could find the respite and resources they needed to make the necessary repairs and re-establish contact with the fleet. "Bring us in slow and steady, helm," Elena ordered, her eyes fixed on the view screen. "Let's try to make a peaceful first impression." The Athena descended through the planet's atmosphere, its battered hull cutting through the thick clouds. Elena could see cities and settlements spread out below, their lights twinkling in the fading daylight. Picking up several smaller vessels in orbit, the sensor officer reported. "They seem to be monitoring our approach, but they haven't made any hostile moves." Elena let out a small sigh of relief. "Good. Hail them. Let them know we're in need of assistance and request permission to land." A tense moment passed before a response came through. "This is Planetary Governor Kiran Raval. You are an unexpected visitor, Captain Varus. What is the nature of your request?" Elena straightened in her chair, her voice calm and measured. "Governor Raval, my ship and crew have been in a fierce battle, and we are in urgent need of supplies and repairs. We mean you no harm, and we would be grateful for any assistance you can provide." Another pause, then Raval's voice replied, "Very well, Captain. You may land at the main spaceport. We will send a security detail to escort you and your senior officers to the capital city, where we can discuss your situation in more detail." "Understood, Governor. We appreciate your hospitality." Elena turned to her crew, a faint glimmer of hope in her eyes. "You heard the man, people. Let's get this ship down in one piece and see what we can do about getting her back in fighting shape." As the Athena approached the spaceport, Elena couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something about this planet and its inhabitants seemed different, somehow. But with their options limited and their resources depleted, she knew they had no choice but to trust in the goodwill of these strangers. Whatever lay ahead, Elena was determined to see her crew through this ordeal. They had faced the enemy and survived, and she would do whatever it took to ensure they made it back home. The Athena's landing at the spaceport was a tense affair, with the crew remaining on high alert as a contingent of armed security personnel approached the ship. Elena, accompanied by Nila and a small security detail, disembarked to meet with the planetary governor. As they were escorted through the bustling city streets, Elena couldn't help but notice the curious stares of the locals. There was an air of quiet unease, a subtle tension that seemed to permeate the atmosphere. Arriving at the Grand Government Complex, Elena and her team were ushered into a spacious conference room, where Governor Raval awaited them. "Captain Varus, welcome to Theron," the governor said, extending a hand in greeting. I must say, your arrival has certainly caused quite a stir. Elena shook the governor's hand, her expression guarded. I apologize for the disruption, Governor. As I mentioned, my ship and crew have been through a harrowing ordeal, and we are in desperate need of assistance. Revel nodded, his brow furrowing. Yes, your message was most concerning. Perhaps you could shed some light on the nature of this ordeal you've experienced. Elena took a deep breath, recounting the events that had led them to this distant planet. As she spoke, she noticed the governor's expression grow increasingly grave, his eyes widening with each new detail. This is most troubling news, Ravel said, his voice tinged with a hint of unease. If what you say is true, then the implications are staggering. Nyla leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean? Do you have some insight into what happened to our fleet? Ravel hesitated, his gaze shifting between the two officers. I'm afraid I cannot provide any definitive answers, Commander. However, the phenomenon you've described, the sudden disappearance of your comrades, is not entirely unfamiliar to us. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What are you saying, Governor? Do you know something about this? Ravel raised a hand, his expression grave. Please, Captain, I understand your urgency, but I must ask that you and your crew remain here for the time being. There are matters of great importance that we must discuss. Elena exchanged a concerned glance with Nayla, her mind racing. What could the governor possibly know about the fate of their fleet? And why did he seem so reluctant to share this information? As the governor summoned his advisors and the meeting began, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something far more momentous than a simple request for aid. The meeting with Governor Ravel and his advisors was a tense and illuminating affair. Elena and Nella listened intently as the Therunian officials laid out their understanding of the strange events that had unfolded. According to our historical records and the observations of our scientists, the phenomenon you've described is not entirely unprecedented, Ravel explained, his voice somber. We have encountered similar incidents in the past, where entire ships or fleets seem to vanish without a trace. Nyla leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And what have you discovered about the cause of these disappearances? One of the advisors, a distinguished-looking woman with graying hair, spoke up. It is a subject of much debate and speculation, but our leading theory is that these events are the result of a kind of temporal disruption. A rift in the fabric of spacetime, if you will. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. A rift in spacetime. Are you suggesting that my crew and I have been somehow displaced in time? The advisor nodded solemnly. That is precisely what we believe has occurred. The energy pulse you witnessed upon the enemy ship's destruction appears to have triggered a localized distortion in the spacetime continuum, effectively separating you and your vessel from the rest of your fleet. Nyla's brow furrowed in thought. So where, or when, exactly are we? Ravel cleared his throat, his expression grave. According to our calculations, you and your crew have been displaced approximately 200 years into the future. The revelation hung in the air, the weight of it palpable. Elena felt a lump forming in her throat as she processed the implications. 200 years, she whispered, her mind reeling. Then our fleet, our families, they're all. Ravel nodded solemnly. I'm afraid so, Captain. Whatever became of your comrades, it is likely that they are long gone by now. Nyla's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles turning white. And what of the enemy ship? Did it suffer the same fate? That, I'm afraid, is where our knowledge becomes more speculative, Ravel admitted. It's possible that the energy pulse that displaced you also affected the enemy vessel in some way. But without more information, we can only theorize. Elena felt a surge of frustration and despair. Then how are we supposed to find our way back? To restore the timeline and rejoin our fleet? Revel's expression was somber. I'm afraid that is a question we have yet to answer, Captain. The nature of these temporal distortions is still not fully understood, and the means to reverse them are elusive at best. As the meeting drew to a close, Elena and Nila were left to grapple with the staggering implications of their predicament. They were adrift in time, cut off from everything and everyone they had known, and the path back home seemed increasingly uncertain. The weight of their situation bore down on the crew of the Athena as they set about the arduous task of repairing their damaged ship. With their fleet long gone and their loved ones lost to the sands of time, the once proud vessel had become a symbol of their isolation and despair. Elena pored over the reports from her engineers, her brow furrowed in concentration. The damage was extensive, and the lack of compatible parts and resources on this distant world made the repairs a daunting challenge. "How long until we can get the Athena back in working order?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the data pad in her hands. Nyla stepped forward, her expression somber. "The best estimate is at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. We're having to fabricate and jury-rig a lot of the components, and the power systems are in desperate need of an overhaul." Elena sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. 2 weeks. That's an eternity, given the gravity of our situation. Nyla placed a reassuring hand on her friend's arm. "I know, Elena, but we have to remain focused and determined. If there's any chance of finding a way back to our own time, the Athena has to be ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead." Elena nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "You're right. We can't afford to lose hope. We've come this far, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let my crew down now." The captain turned to address the assembled engineers and technicians, her voice carrying a newfound sense of purpose. "All right, people, listen up. I know the odds seem stacked against us, and the weight of what we've lost is heavy. But we are Starfleet officers, and we will not be deterred. I want every one of you to give this ship your absolute best. Your skill, your determination, your resilience. We are going to get the Athena back in fighting shape, and we are going to find a way home. Understood." A cheer rose up from the crew, their spirits buoyed by Elena's words. As they set to work with renewed vigor, Elena couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the overwhelming sense of uncertainty. In the days that followed, the Athena's crew labored tirelessly, their hands calloused and their brows furrowed in concentration. Elena and Nila oversaw the repairs, their eyes scanning the intricate web of systems and circuits with a keen eye for detail. And as the days turned into weeks, the Athena began to take shape, her sleek hull regaining its former luster. Elena felt a surge of pride as she watched her ship come back to life, a symbol of their determination and their refusal to surrender in the face of such overwhelming adversity. As the Athena's repairs neared completion, Elena and her crew found themselves drawn into the enigmatic world of Thurun and its enigmatic inhabitants. The governor and his advisors had been forthcoming with information about the temporal anomaly that had displaced the Athena, but there was a sense of unease and hesitation that permeated their interactions. Elena had spent countless hours poring over the Thurunian historical records, searching for any clues that might shed light on their predicament. What she discovered only served to deepen the mystery. According to these accounts, temporal distortions and the disappearance of entire ships or fleets have been a recurring phenomenon on Thurun for centuries. Elena explained to Nila during one of their private discussions. And yet, the people here seem almost resigned to it, as if they've accepted it as a fact of life. Nila's brow furrowed in thought. That's concerning. If this has been happening for so long, you'd think they would have made more progress in understanding it, or at least in trying to find a way to reverse the effects. Elena nodded, her expression grave. Exactly. And what's even more troubling is that the Thurunians seem to have developed a rather unique relationship with these temporal anomalies. Nila's eyes widened. What do you mean? According to these records, the Thurunians have learned to harness the energy released by these distortions, using it to power their cities and fuel their technological advancements, Elena explained. It's as if they found a way to benefit from the very phenomena that have disrupted the lives of countless others. Nyla's jaw tightened. So they're exploiting these anomalies for their own gain, while offering us little more than vague assurances and half-truths. Elena nodded grimly. I'm afraid so. And the more I learn about their history, the more I suspect that they may have had a hand in creating these distortions in the first place. The two officers fell silent, the weight of their discovery hanging heavily in the air. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were caught up in something far more sinister than a simple temporal displacement, that the Therunians were somehow at the center of a much larger and more complex web of intrigue. As the Athena's repairs neared completion, Elena knew that they would soon have to confront the Therunian authorities with their findings. It was a risk, to be sure, but she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Their journey home had become entangled with the mysteries of this distant world, and Elena knew that they could no longer afford to remain passive observers. The fate of their crew, their fleet, and perhaps even the very fabric of the universe itself now hung in the balance. The tension on the Athena's bridge was palpable as Elena and her senior officers faced off against Governor Ravel and his advisors. The Therunian officials had been summoned to hear the captain's findings, and the stakes had never been higher. What you're suggesting is nothing short of preposterous, Captain Veras, Ravel said, his brow furrowed in a mix of indignation and concern. Our people have a long and proud history of coexisting with these temporal anomalies, and we have dedicated countless resources to understanding and mitigating their effects. Elena held the governor's gaze, her expression unwavering. With all due respect, Governor, your people's coexistence with these anomalies seems to be more akin to exploitation. Your historical records indicate that you've been harnessing the energy released by these distortions to power your cities and advance your technology. Revel's eyes narrowed. And what, pray tell, is wrong with that? We have learned to adapt and thrive in the face of these challenges, while your people were simply swept away by the currents of time. Nyla stepped forward, her voice laced with accusation. At the expense of countless lives, including our own crew and fleet. You've known about these anomalies for centuries, yet you've done nothing to help those who have been displaced by them. Revel's expression darkened. We have our own concerns to attend to, Commander. The stability of our civilization and the well-being of our people must take precedence. Elena felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. So you're content to let others suffer, as long as it served your own interests. That's a remarkably callous attitude, Governor. The Therunian officials exchanged uneasy glances, their unease palpable. Elena knew that she had struck a nerve, and she pressed on. We've analyzed the energy signature of the distortion that brought us here, and we believe we found a way to replicate it, to create a rift that could potentially return us to our own time. But we'll need your cooperation to make it work. Revel's expression hardened. Absolutely not. I cannot allow you to tamper with these delicate temporal phenomena. The risks are far too great. Elena's jaw tightened. Then you leave us no choice. We will find a way to create that rift, with or without your help. And when we do, we will expose the truth about your people's involvement in these anomalies to the rest of the galaxy. The Therunian officials fell silent, their faces betraying a mix of fear and defiance. Elena knew that she had pushed them into a corner, but she also knew that the stakes were too high to back down. As the meeting drew to a close, Elena turned to her crew, her eyes burning with determination. Prepare the Athena for launch. We're going home. And with that, the starship surged into the void, its engines roaring to life as it set a course for the unknown. A journey that would pit the crew against the very fabric of the universe itself.